Here's my intro. It's a long one, so either listen, take what you want from it, dismiss what you want, or fucking skip it. I don't give a shit, it's up to you. It's your choice, but I feel it needs added. You can also consider it a Christmas present. Just consider it an empty box with some pretty red wrapping and a bow, and when you open it up, there's not a goddamn thing inside. You know why? Because I'm not telling you what to think. I'm telling you what I think, and I'm hoping that you think. Next, this is Chief Cox. I have another nickname for him, but for the sake of the video, I'll address him as Chief. During the video, he repeatedly mentioned that there are some people who should not have firearms, and regardless of your opinion or mine on that comment, he seems to be ignoring the fact that there are already thousands of laws and procedures in place to prevent people who are considered prohibited persons from acquiring firearms. They can write 1,000 more laws, but at the end of the day, criminals and those intent on doing harm will still find a way to get and use those firearms for their own motives. Red flag laws, new laws only infringe upon and prohibit law-abiding citizens because criminals don't buy their guns legally, nor carry them legally. All your signs and papers on your doors, desires and laws written on paper, and background checks don't mean jack shit to a person determined to wreak havoc, and only prohibit law-abiding citizens who are law-abidingly following your bullshit laws in the first place. And they are the only ones who are affected by them because, say it with me now, criminals don't care about laws or signs, and I don't care about your misguided emotions ignoring those facts. Next. He repeatedly used the I can't or I won't answer a hypothetical response, but I call it cowardly, and I call bullshit. If he were being asked if I should try to stop someone from coming up behind and stabbing him or shooting him to death, if he didn't see it happening, I'd bet he'd have an answer to that hypothetical, and his answer wouldn't be, I'm not going to answer a hypothetical. His answer would be, yes, you should aid me. I call it a cop-out, pun intended. I think he needs to read about what the Virginia Democrats were trying to do recently, so he might get a sense of what the possibilities are. His first name is Heath, but I used Chief or Chief Cox, I believe, to address him. I refrained, I'm positive, from calling him by my nickname and or his first name. Often, the use of a first name, especially by people in specific positions, is for unspoken motive, such as, but not limited to, disrespect and or maintaining a sense of superiority and or feigned bonding, etc. I would just be willing to bet if I had called him Heath, or his other nickname, that's not so flattering, he probably would not have enjoyed the conversation as much and probably would have requested that I cease and desist doing so. I mean, last I checked, we weren't friends, and I'd be willing to bet he's not very fond of me. But I'll tell you what, Heath, if you'd like to invite me out shooting sometime, maybe we can get to know each other. Who knows, maybe we'll become buddies. Next, often, it's not so much what someone says, it's what they don't say, what they refuse to say, or what they say around what they're trying not to say, that contains the most meaning and relevance. Next, my opinion is that though he mentions his support for the Constitution, he is also the same person who compelled one of his subordinates, or one of his officers, to submit to the county prosecutor to try to have me charged for my cop-watching activities, which I believe was his attempt to both silence me and maintain non-transparency, even though I had committed no crime. He's also one of the same who arrested me for standing in front of a sign that read no public access beyond this point. Next, look, make no mistake, if I'm to be classified as an extremist or a bad guy because I prefer to be one of the ones willing to fight and willing to stand for the Constitution and for other people's rights.
I'm the bad guy?
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
Then I'll consider both of those labels as badges of honor and those ascribing them to me as the cowards that I believe they are. Do you honestly think I care what the same people whom want to infringe on our rights would call me? In the interest of fairness, common courtesy, and basic human respect, aspects I think this chief doesn't have much of a grasp upon, and regardless of my personal opinion of him, I will thank him for his time. Thanks, Chief. Heath. Now, we on YouTube have short attention spans, and I try to leave in the most relevant and useful information while still having to edit and keep the video as short as possible for everyone. Of course, my analysis of this conversation could be wrong, so stop your whining and make up your own minds.
Chief Cox, I got a question for you.
Sure.
If you got a minute.
Let me put this down. I got a second.
That'll be fine. I've been asking all your other officers, your street officers, one basic question about their support for the Constitution.
Yes.
And I was going to come in at some point and start requesting the upper echelon, see if I can get some of you guys to come down to the lobby. So I figured I'd just ask you, since I saw you out here.
Okay.
if there was a law that was passed that was contrary to the Second Amendment, or if government suddenly decided that they didn't like the Second Amendment, and you were ordered for whatever reason to pass down to your subordinates, all the street officers, an order telling them to go confiscate firearms from otherwise law-abiding citizens, whether that is going door to door or going person to person, would you comply with that order, and would you then enforce it through the rest of your department since you're the chief?
Well, and I understand the Second Amendment and everything that you want to know about this. Because to me, it's one of those things, there's some people who don't need firearms because people that are dangerous, and so I agree, but also I believe you have to be careful because you don't want to create a way where the government potentially could take firearms from lawful abiding citizens.
Absolutely.
And so there's a balance. I don't know what it looks like, but I agree that some people don't need firearms, but also you got to protect the rights of people, individuals by the Second Amendment.
I appreciate that, and that's a good political response, but
No, that's the truth.
But my question is this: if you were ordered to pass along orders to your subordinates to go door to door and confiscate firearms from otherwise law-abiding citizens who've done nothing wrong, would you
Well, that's
comply?
all hypothetical. You have to provide means where you don't tread on people's rights.
I agree.
And what that looks like, I don't know.
If it was contrary to the Second Amendment, would you comply with that order?
Well, if anything says you have to confiscate them, that's going to be contrary unless what's it going to look like and who are you going to take firearms away from? So it's all hypothetical unless there's something in place. And
So-
until I know what that looks like, I mean, it would be unwise to comment on something that's hypothetical.
Okay. It sounds to me like you would comply, but I'll let people decide that for
That's not
themselves.
what I said.
Okay, I understand that's not what you said, but you're not answering the question. You should be a politician. Now I understand why you're chief here, and that's no disrespect for you, but you got the words down. And here's my position then. If it's contrary to the Second Amendment, then it's unconstitutional. If it's contrary to the Second Amendment, then it's an unlawful law, and therefore it would be an unlawful order.
But also, you have to realize the Bill of Rights, which I'm sure you do. You're very educated. I know this.
Enough.
Well,
I'm dumb.
all of us enough.
I'm
right?
dumb to some standards.
Well, like the Bill of Rights, they could change any one of them with enough votes.
Right, but they don't have enough votes.
Well, I'm just saying
Right.
that to say that they could, if they were going to make a way, and that was the argument, if they had enough votes, they could change the Second Amendment, we'd just do away with it.
I'm sorry, but this has to be mentioned. The government does not grant us certain basic rights, such as self-preservation and protection, and they laid out specifically those rights to only to limit and restrict the government, not to limit and restrict nor grant to citizens. And because they knew that after what we had already gone through with the monarchy of England and our fight for independence, that they had to ensure they mention, not granted, but mention certain rights to promote and protect a long-living republic governed by the people. Next.
Well, I don't think they would be able to at this point. But so what
But
I'm
that's
saying
hypothetical too.
again. So right. So what I'm asking you then is, if somebody came to you, this is real simple, and said, "Hey, I know this is contrary to the Second Amendment, but I'm your boss basically because I'm in the government above you, and I am ordering you to compel your officers to go door to door or person to person and confiscate firearms because that's what the government wants to do, and we've decided that pesky citizen sheep shouldn't have firearms anymore." Would you look at them and say, well, okay, it's contrary to the Second Amendment, I'm still going to do it? Or would you look at them and say, no, I support the Constitution and the Second Amendment? Where does your support lie? That would be my question.
All hypothetical.
So you can't answer?
Well, I'm not going to answer because it's hypothetical. I mean,
So you would support it?
I support the Second Amendment, but also I realize some people don't need to have firearms because of the danger they impose. But what that looks like, that's above my pay grade. I don't make the laws.
To me, you sound like a politician, the typical ones in Washington that continually
Well, the way
allow
you worded the
infringements.
question, if you want to get specific, you were wording it where no matter what I would answer.
No, it's either yes or no. Either you would comply with an unconstitutional order compelling you, or you wouldn't. It's not that hard. I'm not making this. Doesn't go any deeper than that. If someone came to you and said, "Hey, I know this is against the Second Amendment, but we want you to do it," and as your boss, whoever that would be above you in the state of Kentucky, we are compelling you to compel your people below you, your street officers, the field officers, to go out and do this. I would think you would be able to state, yes, I would comply with that order, or no, I wouldn't because I support the Second Amendment.
Well, it's like this. If it came to that, it would be I would have a very strong opinion.
Okay, Chief, and what if they voted to remove our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or our First Amendment right, or our Fifth Amendment right? Would you feel okay to act against the citizens then, ignoring those should-be rights, even though they were removed because the government decided we shouldn't have them? I mean, they're not in the Constitution anymore at that point, right? So you should be able to just walk up to my door and kick it in and tell me I have to confess to the crime, right, Chief?
You would have a very strong
But
opinion.
I'm not going to tell you what that is.
You won't answer, so you won't answer the question.
Well, no, it's all hypothetical. Why would I answer something?
Well, because it gives us an idea. It would be like you asking me if someone dropped $50 on the ground, would I pick it up and put it in my pocket, or would I pick it up and take it in and try to either find the person who dropped it because it's not mine and I know it's not mine and I would consider it thievery, or take it to a cashier and say, hey, somebody dropped this out there. If hypothetical or not, it still gives indication as my support and where my morals and my ethics lie. So that's why I'm asking you where your morals and your ethics lie. Do they lie with the Constitution and the Second Amendment in that situation where someone would try to compel you to violate the Second Amendment, or do they lie with your job as a badged officer?
And I understand that. We took an oath to defend the Constitution.
You did?
Uphold the Constitution.
You did?
Well, that's there. Obviously, they can change it if they want to, but then I got a personal belief system
Okay.
that would have to go in effect at that point, but I'm not going to answer.
And you don't
what
want
it
to talk
is.
about that
No.
personally. I want to say what I think you're saying here, and you can tell me if I'm incorrect so I don't misspeak for you. It sounds to me like you're saying that as a police officer, unless the Constitution were changed and they came to you and tried to compel you to go contrary to the Constitution or order your subordinates to do so, that you would decline. Is that a fair assessment?
I believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights,
Okay.
and everybody has a right to those rights.
Okay.
That's what we swore to. Right now, everything else is hypothetical, past that. I don't think they'll ever have the votes. The NRA is too powerful. They got too many people they support in high places. Ain't nothing going to change. It's just they scare people into thinking that they're going to take their guns.
Well, let's hope it doesn't ever get to that.
Because it has to be a safeguard. Because you don't want to open a door and a pathway where the government can come take your firearms.
Absolutely.
And that's why our government's structured the way it is. Checks and balances.
True,
Who's
but
going to check the person that... Because just if somebody just don't like so-and-so, they come get their guns? Well, who's deciding that?
well, that's what
What if you open that up?
But that's what red flag laws do. They allow people who have a grudge with somebody to call up, and then the law enforcement can and is often ordered to go and confiscate law-abiding citizens' firearms with no due process, which is also a clause in the Constitution. So
Due
that's
process,
yes. So that's another one of my problems is with red flag laws is because it basically is circumventing the Constitution and is a backdoor to take firearms, because then who gets to decide who should have their guns taken?
Checks and balances.
Right.
That's
but,
right.
But the checks and balances aren't working, or we wouldn't have red flag laws in the first place. That's what I would say.
Well, I understand both. I mean, we took an oath to protect the Constitution,
Sure.
the Bill of Rights, to defend that and ensure people, not only if someone violates someone else's rights, we step in and address that. But also, some people don't need firearms. And with everything in the news, I understand why it's on people's mind. They may be trying to do this because they see a problem, they want to address it, but also you have to protect what if somebody was in power and was using that power illegally or undermining.
So do you agree with red flag laws that circumvent the due process clause of the Constitution? Do you think Kentucky should have a red flag law?
Well, like I said,
What's your opinion on red flag laws? Do you want to answer that? Or would
I
you
don't
prefer
know
not
enough
to?
about it. I haven't researched them enough. I know other states. Obviously, I know there's been talk, but it's all hypothetical right
Well-
now in the state of Kentucky. There has to be checks and balances.
I
That's
agree.
why our government's structured the way it is.
I believe we're losing those checks and balances because so many people are voting and they're not educated on what they're voting on, and they just seem to vote with emotion, and they forget they want to shut down such as free speech. Oh, well, this should be hate speech. Well, the problem with making anything hate speech is then who gets to decide? And then that's a slippery slope.
that's a good point,
Because
too.
if you say that something's hate speech and not free speech, then down the road, the next person in charge could say, well, I don't like you being able to say car, because car to me is hate speech. It does seem to me like you don't want to answer the question, and that's...
Well, I'm not going to answer it hypothetically.
You will at least say that you support the Second Amendment, the Constitution, and Bill of Rights, correct? That's what I understand.
And some people don't need firearms, but what does that look like? Because there should be due process.
I agree.
Just because somebody has a vendetta against somebody doesn't mean you should lose your firearms.
I
There
agree.
needs to be a process. Now, if that looks like a jury, you have to bring it, and then 12 people in the community decide, because then you got to balance on just the government. I mean, I don't know.
Right?
That's above my pay grade, but I do believe, I understand both, but I know what the Bill of Rights say. Hypotheticals are hard to answer.
If somebody came up behind you right now and started shooting at you, there's no hypothetical, I should draw my weapon and try to keep you from getting killed. That's not a hypothetical or not. There's still a base response that is logical, black and white, and good or bad. That's what I would say.
I'm not going to answer hypothetically.
I know. That's fine.
That's an answer.
That's an answer. Here's a few other more oath-keeping and direct answers also.
Our country was founded on that Constitution, and while you may not have an agreement with that Constitution, that's the founding document of the United States. And when I take my oath of office, my oath says that I will first protect the Constitution of the United States. If a law is written that is in conflict with that Constitution, whether it's the state Constitution or the United States Constitution, that puts me in peril of violating my oath and also violating a constituent's constitutional rights.
He's a Maryland sheriff who says he will not enforce any new gun laws in his state. Sheriff Mike Lewis of Wacomico County.
Lewis made news in February when he vowed he would not enforce additional gun control laws if they pass the Maryland legislature this year.
If these bills passed, we will not comply.
When they view their government as being tyrannical, overreaching, I want them to know that I'm not one of those government officials.
The newly elected Republican sheriff of Osage County, Michael Dixon, says he will refuse to enforce any law aimed at blocking the purchase, possession, and use of firearms for law-abiding Americans. Joining him in that position is the sheriff of Johnson County, Missouri. Sheriff Charlie Heiss says to do so would be tantamount to an all-out assault on the United States Constitution.
Chief Lauren Culp joins us now. Good morning. Welcome to the show.
I cannot and will not enforce this law. It goes against the oath of my office.
I got more respect for those little bastards up there. At least they take a side.